Order of business is GPA docket 2319, petition to extend the performance management contract for Cabot 22. We received no report and report order.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, what GPA currently has with the Cabot 23 PMC is an additional 2-year term that expires on September 30 of this year, this month, basically. And this particular contract does have 2 1-year extensions, and GPA is requesting that you see it through GPA's exercise of these optional 2-year periods, the total amount of 8.1 million. Now, I reviewed this, and really at the heart of this is the consent decree that GPA has with the US EPA. So, currently, that consent decree states that Everest 1 and 2 be retired no later than October 31st of 2024. However, the original plan was retiring Everest 1 and 2 by that date. Fortunately, with the recent typhoon and the damage that was caused to the power plant, GPA is now going to require services of Everest 1 and 2 beyond October 31st. Their request to exercise both 1-year option periods. Now, looking at the cost, so 8.1 million in the total cost of these 2-year periods does meet the review thresholds. We need to use this period before they can exercise this option. The $8.1 million cost is reasonable. Basically, under this, GPA and the Cabot 1 and 2 PMC would have to kind of mutually agree the operations, maintenance, supply, services, inventory management, and control. They kind of set the 1M budget for the periods of contract at 1.3 million per year. PA and tenants have negotiated a 2.6 million fixed management fee for the first extension, about a 2.7 fixed management fee for the second extension. Fine, that's over and above the 1.3 O&M expenses for each year. I determined that the extensions are approved. The PUC has previously found that PMC's for Cabot 22 have actually improved the operational efficiency, viability, and cost savings of the power plants. And then I've also found the extensions are necessary. So, GPA currently only has 2 baseload power plants, Cabot 1 and 2. One of these baseload plants. GPA does not exercise extensions. It's unlikely that Cabot 1 and 2 will be online because of greater disruption. It's where we operate the otherwise power system until the new power plant is completed. Based on the foregoing, I do recommend that we PUC approve extensions for tenants for Cabot 1 and 2 PMC at $8.1 million cost. Provide a draft order that would achieve that. So, questions, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Anthony. John, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Commissioners, my apologies for being late. Yes, if you recall, the Commission may recall that the original date for the time for the completion of the Oakville Power Plant was October 2022, and that got extended to April 2024, and now it's looking like January 2026. So we did back then set the period for the Tennis PMC to 3+2, and now that +2 will bring us actually into September 2025. And again, we hope that something better happens, that the schedule gets accelerated a little bit, and we can get at that point. I should expect that the combustion turbines and other are running and be close to commission by sometime the end of 2025. There is no way that the GPA can reliably operate campus 1 and 2 without support from TEMIS, and that's one major reason is being able to provide additional expertise and materials and parts necessary to be sorted if any emergency occurs. Case in point, well, first of all, Typhoon Mawar. They all hang around me. It's just, Omar and Mawar, of course, took down the Jigu CT 20 megawatt. And that would be something before you this coming Thursday. But that machine won't be ready until, I would say, within the December timeframe. And so the load shedding has been occurring over this past month in particular, has all been because Campus number 2 has not been able to come back for almost a month. We've had tube leak after tube leak after tube leak, and there's what we call screen tubes. It takes 2 or 3 days just to fix one tube, then rehydro it, something else breaks, takes another 2 or 3 days because it's in a very difficult location. DLCMA, perhaps we have it now, but furthermore, we have to balance the generator, something that we would not have been able to do without the assistance of the PMC. So that process is going on, and hopefully this weekend we can get number 2 back on and one stay on at least for some period of time. Our plan is to go in and go looking to order tubes for that machine, Campus 2, and change the whole bank of the screen tube that's been busting on us. And by doing that, that will help to improve the reliability of number 2. And so, again, there's no way we can live without number 2 without massive load shedding. And secondly, I can honestly say that we will try, but it's a plan for failure not to have the PMC on board for us. The PMC price has increased, and part of that is because they're adding 2 engineers technician to the team for the period of time, requiring more assistance, more help when needed to get the machine running. So I asked the Commission for your approval to allow us again, that will bring us at least close to the commissioning deadline. We'll get that closed and we'll deal what we have to deal with at that time. But I believe Attorney Camacho has said, it's the most prudent decision on our part is to go ahead and, of course, I got to receive his approval and ask for your approval of this extension.
Thank you, John. John, because the deadlines have been pushed back now, does federal EPA have any concerns with us using cab 1 and 2 for a longer period of time?
We have had a meeting, which called Teams meeting with US EPA. So they are aware that the date has been moved to January 2026, and we are providing all the documents that we can get to provide them from CAPCO and all the other different events to show that that's what we have at this point. They didn't seem to, they weren't pounding on the table, so I think, we just came through a super typhoon, so what can we say? But I think we'll be okay with that. But I do have to try very hard to push and try and keep them on the January 2026 date because 2 strikes for you, okay, which is where we are now. 3 strikes, then maybe they will be pounding something on the table at that point. So,
John, is there much of a water quality issue with the boiler tubes down in cab 1 and 2? Is that why they're having such an issue?
not really, Mr. Chair, because otherwise you'll be having all kinds of tubes, different types, superheaters, economizers, all popping in. This is a spring tube. We haven't been changed actually in the as long as I can remember. And so and this spring tube is actually just like it's just like a pathway, a barrier to send the gases this way and around the boiler. And so somehow it's got something to do with breathing, is what my understanding is, well, after 50 years.
And the contract would state that they have to have availability at about 70%.
Yes, 70%, because it's not we don't even run it up to 66 now. I can limit it at 55, 45, 50.
So when you say 70%, you mean 70% of the time?
70% availability.
And the load that you would get out of cab 1 and 2 is down in the 40, 45 megawatt range now?
That's correct. And now as we look ahead, that we're 2 years away, I'm going to see if I can get that machine up a little more, closer to the 45, of course, and maybe 50. But I have to have some work done on them. But the stock market is one alternative we do have, because again, I don't think any of us want to continue on the edge moving forward. And so I do have a resolution to be before the CCU tomorrow, which is to try and look at procuring a temporary power. And I'm doing a two-pronged attack because if my plan for restoring as much as possible doesn't work for whatever reason, and the odds have been against us recently. So therefore, I need to make sure that I have other actions in the table.
If we did not have the use of these 2 generators, we would probably be looking at massive load shedding, far worse than what happened.
Yeah, the moves in load shedding have not been too bad, actually. I mean, it's bad for some people because it's constantly happening around. They have their time frame that we've given them, and we're going to shift it around in the beginning October 1st. But it's usually now just between around maybe 6:30 to about 8:30, something like that. But if the other cabbage unit goes down, then you're dropping another 40 megawatts. 40 megawatts is another 12 to 13 circuits in one time. So now you're in the 2-hour load shedding. That's why people schedule, they've been provided a 2-hour schedule. And if it's really bad, you will tell them it's two base loads down. But number 1 has been holding on, and I'm afraid that it continues to operate that way. And looks so far it's looking all right. But number 2, we've identified tubes already. Perhaps we can get it in here by January. Take her out in February. Take about 30 days and cut out that whole bunch of sections. We're talking about 20-foot sections, about 70 of them, and change it out so that we can hopefully run through for another year or 2 years.
Now, one of the big issues, of course, we're facing now is peak load between about 6 and 10 every evening. We started a docket some years ago now that's been remaining dormant on time of use rates. Do you think it would be wise to start looking at that again a little bit more at this time, John? Maybe to help out with the peak
The time of use?
time of use rates?
I don't think so at this point, Mr. Chair, because really the time of use, the peak is the most expensive period of time. And why? This is when all the residentials that go home, And be it as it may, we asked for customers to shut off their water heater in the evening. Well, one may not think that is very much, but a normal water heater coal will go at least 4 kilowatts. And water heater, when it's hot, and then someone showers and it tries to maintain the temperature, pulls somewhere around 1.7 kilowatts. So we have 46,000 residential customers each having a water heater. We get 10,000 of that customers turn off their water heater for periods when we have difficulty. Now you're talking 17 megawatts of demand that is reduced. We do have interruptible load now, about 16 megawatts. The Navy and other hotels and other things that we're trying to get working some more. The Navy is working on a Rody power plant, trying to get the 12 megawatts back in a Rody to assist. They understand the situation. We help out. But it's, with all the 2 cameras, it's a lot of load shedding. And but if we can get them running, then we won't really feel much as we have done in the past. Remember when we lost campus 3 and 4, a scenario, and all of that.
You think a program developed to take the hot water heaters out during the voluntary, people could sign up for it, and take that out of the peak? Generally, I think the hot water heater represents about 20% of the average load of a residential household.
That's what we're thinking more, and John Bruce is working on this, is load management of water heaters, where we can take it off, where it is set with a mechanism that will allow us to cut it off. And no one will really feel it, because if you just turn up your water heater and maybe 4, 5, 6 will use it, it's not hot water there. Yeah. What happens is the water temperature may be set at 130. 135 is scalding or all that. 945, 130. Turn it on and then put in all the cold water to get to the water temperature you want. Well, you don't need to do that. You can set it down at 110. That helps already. So we have a concerted media effort to ask customers to do that. And I think some of that is happening right now, because, our peak demand now is over the 240. Yeah. We have 222 today. That's already 222, 32, 40. That's already with the interruptible load. We're still load shedding maybe 4 circuits for a total of about an hour and a half or 2. We are about 40. This is the highest September. October starts to go down, November, of course, and then December, it's good. So as far as interruptible load, really not only separate that we're load shedding, and then we're going to raise the rates, because that would mean you don't have to raise the evening rate, and then those in the daytime will get a break, or vice versa. But I think load management, who asked Mr. Priest, is trying to put that to the front burner. That would help. And again, not only now, but even in the future. And really providing an incentive there will work well for everybody. Because it helps them save money, at the same time it provides us more capacity for whatever we need.
Yeah. Any questions? No.
This extension starts October 1st, so the 2 additional engineers are on island already?
I don't think so, not yet, but I think they've been set up to come on island.
Can we get a timeline on that?
Yes, I can hear you.
Is US EPA going to provide anything in writing for GPA to continue the use of Campus 1 and 2 as a result of this deadline that they set for
We'll be negotiating an amendment to the dateline. There will be, there's nothing, because we have also filed a force majeure scenario, so we have to supply all the documents and everything. So it'll take a while before they even think about, trying to analyze that. So there's no immediate,
John, you mentioned in January of 26, this is a 2-year extension through September 30th, 25. So, I have to
yeah.
hear that.
That's what I mentioned earlier, we'll take it when it comes, meaning I may be back to ask for a 3-month or 4-month extension at that point. If not, for some reason, the plan gets a permission right around that date, then we can.
I know it's a little bit early, but with Mawar now, when do you expect Oakland to come back on? I mean, to start?
Hopefully, they have already started, although they're having, difficulties here and there, but they have already started. What I heard is the pipeline continues to go. They've already demolished the 2 or 3 of the tanks and loaded materials to store. So they have started continuing. And they have to, because a lot of the other machinery, all the major pieces of machinery are there already. And so they have to follow up the building, start connecting all the wirings, and start doing all of that. So work continues there.
So you have an estimate timeline of
Well, they told me January 2026. Secondly, I have not accepted that. So they're giving us all the documents so we can, I and the team can say, okay, yes, or it should be earlier. Then we'll agree. For all intents and purposes, we told US EPA January 2026 because that's the best information that we have today.
refresh my memory. How much baseload was that operation?
198 megawatts. And then the
Generated?
3 45 megawatt combustion turbine that the exhaust is run into a heat recovery boiler to produce steam to run a 63 megawatt steam turbine. So the combination, so you can run with or without the steam turbine. But for practical purposes, because of air permitting constraint, you need to be running them basically all the time, except for once every 4 years when we have to take the turbine down for 30 days. That's when all the reserves become available. I'm not worried then because by then we will have some energy shifting batteries. In fact, that's one of the other things that is on the table for the Adanasia Commission is to pursue a 45 megawatt, 225 megawatt hour energy storage battery. What does that do? That's like a 45 megawatt machine that you run from 6 to 11 at night. And where do you charge it from? From all the daytime renewables, or in the early morning, when the load is the lowest, you can charge the battery. So whether it rains or shines, you can shine this battery, and that will give you a reduction of the peak. So you just shave 40 megawatts of peak, reducing your capacity needs. I'm saying that because in all the renewables that we're going maybe like a 50-50 now. We can't afford 100% shifting because of the economies of scale. It's not working. And And so, but having centralized battery, which is spread over 1.5 billion kilowatt hours, is actually less than a cent kilowatt hour versus the energy storage battery within each of the different utility scale. This could be as much as 4 to 6 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay. So this is very versatile, diverse. I'm waiting for the military and others it's one of our top requests to them to fund, not one, but 4 of those to help with the reliability of the system. I'm using Air Force Base, Naval Station, one at Oakwood. By having these old charts already, you have that capacity that even the whole island blackout, the batteries will get you running for several hours at a time. So again, that's, I'll mention it today, Mr. Chair, but there's also something in the works that we are looking at.
Anything else?
Is this, your temporary, you said you're working on getting some temporary power or some kind of backup power? When are you working, when is that happening?
The resolution will be before the CC for tomorrow's meeting.
Is it gonna be around January or February?
You're looking at somewhere around the 4 month.
About the same time when you're gonna take down campus too?
Yeah. So it's really, we're gonna work ourselves out of this situation with the machines we have on board and everything that we can do. But the additional megawatts really doesn't refer to the end of the year or January. So, yeah, but again, we want to look forward for the next 2 years to make sure we always have adequate reserve in that.
So make sure that we have enough battery, or we have enough capacity to take down campus too.
Yeah. So when we have situations like this again, in the middle of the peak next September, October, we have that 40 megawatt of cushion. Plus whatever we have restored.
Speaking of the 40 megawatts, what is the current status of all those 1 megawatt?
This is the one that the PUC and CCUS approved for EMC. I did go out and then right off the bat, we got protested. So we tried to run it, it wasn't one protest, it was more than one.
Just the ones that we purchased, the ones we were leasing and we purchased.
So we're running it and we're down to about 10 megawatts in the machine. All I need on board is the PMC so that we can begin repairing. I've also, because about maybe 10 or 15 of them are already at the 24,000 hours, it's time to overhaul them. So either we overhaul them or we bring in like 1.1 megawatt replacement, which is about the same price. We can bring in some cheaper.
So are we currently using any of them?
Yes.
The power?
About 9-10 megawatts.
Just 10 megawatts.
Yeah, but we can bring it out. I'm hoping that we're trying to get us out of this current protest. If we do, I'm trying to get about 25 megawatts back out of that within the next, say, 3 to 6 months. So that will help also. Yeah. In addition to that, I'm trying to get Penzo units up. But where are we in the protest? Well, we resolved one, and the other we decided it's just we didn't qualify.
So this is separate from what we're working on for additional.
Yeah, this is separate.
And then when you were talking earlier about the EAF, on that availability factor, that's something you're talking about.
Yes.
That's capacity though, right? That's not time use. You're talking about, they're saying that they're gonna run it at 70% of their 90 megawatts or 80 megawatts available.
Well, it's a combination of time and capacity. So when we were using the 85 or 90 EAF, you're talking about 60 megawatts for the whole year times 85%. So that much generation.
It's a clause in the contract that they have
And now,
to at least 70%.
yeah. And now we're talking about more like 45 megawatts now, and for 70% of the year.
70%.
Yeah. Okay.
Generate over 2 months.
Usually one is 40 and one is 45. Right?
Yeah, right now one is 41, one is 35, but they were both doing about 45 megawatt before the storm. So we think we can get them back there, 45 is 50, if we get some other stuff.
So it's not 7% of the heat power.
Again, you're aiming to get both units running at about 45 megawatts for about 70% of the calendar year. Is that correct?
That's good.
So, yeah, so we need to.
So what happens is, if they run for 3 months, that's good, and then you take them down for about 2-3 weeks and do maintenance and bring them up again. They just run continuously, then that will work for all of us. Because when they're running, we can do the other maintenance with the other machine. It's when it happens like this, and it's not running for more than a few days, a week, that's what's been creating the issue today. That's what we're going to try to resolve by cutting out the border tubes and changing that so that we can try and get it running for several months at a time.
One more thing, where are we at with combustion turbine number 7? Is that operating?
Yes, PD number 7 is operating and has been operating around 31 megawatts. Unfortunately, there's some insulation that has to be done on the machine, so it's only been running at 22 megawatts. And unfortunately, we can't bring her down until Campus 1 comes up. Because if we bring her down and she doesn't come up the same evening, then we're 22 more megawatts load shedding. So we're waiting as soon as Campus comes up and it's stabilized for a little while. It takes us about 3 to 5 days. Put some insulation on the plenum and all of that, and then we'll have back up to 31 megawatts. So that will be the incremental improvement moving forward. But we have to get through this phase that we're in, and hopefully we're through this phase this weekend.
Right now, every day is a challenge, isn't it?
Yes, it's a challenge. We try to prepare the public by providing the schedule, and then we've been religiously trying to take them no earlier than the top of the hour, no, the bottom of the hour, but certainly no later than the top of the hour. At least people at their, not people, but our customers at their time frame that, can plan something else. So that's been working. I'm not sure not everyone's happy, but at least we're trying to, and it's been working out, giving us a chance. We've been not load shedding in the daytime. Part of it is because of the utility scale. And we have to do emergency work. We try and hold them into the early morning, and then we'll start working, and then we'll get it back there at night. So that's the rotation of going right.
Thank you, John. Anything else from the commission? If not, is there a motion?
Is my math correct? It's $8.1 million for, so all we're getting is 45 megawatts, 70%. What you're saying? So we're paying $180,000 a megawatt.
The 70% is the
Versus 2 years.
70% is if they don't keep it running like that, then they get penalized. But they could run longer than that. But the capacity of 45 megawatt, I can push it. I know I can say go up to 50, 55, and 60, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to break something earlier, So I'd rather have the 45 megawatt.
I'm just trying to compare it to the standby, those containers that we have. So the regular projects, right? So per megawatt, we had 40 of those. Do you remember what it cost per day?
I think we bought that, the 41 megawatts for about 8 million or so. But it was costing, under the 5-year lease, excluding fuel, it was costing us somewhere around 11 million a year.
So this particular contract is extension of 3.1. That's all GPA pays, isn't it? Or do we pay additional expenses over here on that? We pay for fuel in Canada.
On which one?
I mean, for the campus one too, right? So this is just operation.
Yeah. Fuel is, GPA is responsible for all fuel in all the generation. So the only, what you're paying is, again, the O&M, the 1.3, that's the budget for them. It's the normal oil, everything for the power plant. The only fee that it is the management fee, which is the 2.6. And in that, it covers the 8 personnel that are here. That. But otherwise, and then if any additional work, CIP and everything, major work, then that's when we come to you or else for additional work. But the regular one, the 1.3, they don't spend 1.3, then we don't pay 1.3.
Is there a motion? In order, Anthony's written up in order.
Motion to approve GPA adopting 2319.
There's a second? Rowena seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Pedro, your name. So 5-1, the motion passes. Thank you, John.
Thank you for this, thank you very much.
Next item is GWA docket 1908, annual true-up submission, projection, and request for fiscal year 2024 rates. We have a Georgetown Consulting Group report and a response to GWA's rate submission, an ALJ report, and a proposed order. Fred?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, I'm going to pass out a couple of matters on rates for you to look at. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This matter comes before the Commission on the annual true-up of rates docket, GWA docket 19-08. First, I kind of just want to give an overview of where we are in this matter. GWA has requested a 27% overall increase on all classes of rate payments. This would cost $28 million. That would be paid by the ratepayers. This, as far as true-ups go, is the largest true-up request in the history of the PUC. And in terms of one-year rate increases, if granted, it would be the largest rate increase in the history of the PUC. If approved, as I said, it would be the largest. Now, there was once previously a 14.5% increase granted. But these numbers are not in the ordinary of the history of the PUC and its practice. I passed out to you the two schedules. I really want you to get an idea of what the largeness of this rate impact would mean. You first have the true-up Schedule L, which is GWA's schedule. And it basically shows that for all the residential classes, it would actually be a 17.2% increase. For the commercial classes, it would be a 17.4 to 17.5% increase. And I'd like you to look at some of the numbers again so you get an idea. A residential customer with a 3/4 inch meter using 3 kgals, the rate would increase from $63.73 in FY 2023 up to $81.07 for FY 2024. And that's an increase of $17.34. Remember, that's a monthly charge. You multiply that, you get over $200 a year for a residential customer in that category. And you can go down the list and see what the increases are. For those residential customers that use more water, again, they pay a larger amount. For example, 5 kgals, $69.75 up to $88.73. 6 kgals, $82.68 up to $105.20. These are really substantial increases for the ratepayers to have to bear at this point. And if you look at the commercial, it gets even more daunting. There, you can see on the commercial side, of course, the rates are a lot higher, but for the different size meters, starting with commercial 1, it goes from a rate of $722 a month in FY 2023 up to $920 in FY 2024. And that repeats throughout. And some of these categories, of course, the fees are quite large. Hotels, a hotel using 300 kgals will go up from $26,834 up to $34,189.97. So I just wanted you to see what would the actual impact be of a 27.2 or a 27.5 increase here. It's very substantial. Now, the second sheet I've given you compares the difference between the staff recommendation, which is a 16.1% increase, and GWA's, which is between 27.2 and 27.5. And I did want to note we have Jim Madden online listening with us tonight, so he will be available for questions. But when you look at the comparison, again, now we have to admit a 16.1% increase is not peanuts. It's what we call rate shock generally. It's over 10%. That's what we're recommending. Again, the largest recommended true-up rate increase in history, because based on the evaluation of GCG and myself, we found that there were legitimate costs that had to be addressed, power expenses, debt service coverage, and others. But you can see here, certainly with a 16.1% rate increase difference, the rate increase would be much lower. For the pre-KGAL residential customer, $73.99 under the staff. Under GWA, $81.07. So certainly the 16.1% will mitigate substantially the overall rate increase. It's certainly not ideal, but it's more bearable for the ratepayers than what GWA is requesting. As I mentioned, generally, a 10% increase is deemed to be rate shock, a double-digit increase. In approving rate increases, the PUC has to be cognizant of two factors. One is, what are the needs of the utility, and what kind of rates are necessary so it can meet its obligations. But on the other hand, there's a balance of interests. We have to take into account the ratepayers and whether a particular increase is something that the ratepayers can or should be required to bear. In my opinion, GWA has not enough taken into account moderating this rate increase so that it would be bearable by ratepayers. All the burden is placed on the ratepayers if that increase is approved. It would not be reasonable. It would not be just for the ratepayers, and it's too great an impact on them when you're talking about hundreds of dollars a year. Now, the proposal of Georgetown and the ALJ, that's not going to cause joy to the ratepayers of Guam. Quite sure. But that figure at least corresponds to actual increases in expenses that GWA was able to demonstrate. I'm not going to belabor this point, but this is a true-up proceeding. A true-up generally, you would take the rates from the last rate decision in September 2022, and for this true-up, you would look at what are the categories that have increased. But generally, you would use that rate schedule from the last rate case to determine that. And here, GWA has not done that. They have gone far beyond the ordinary true-up. This was more what they presented. It's like a mini rate case almost. The filing includes an FY 2024 revenue forecast, which employs an enhanced methodology with new assumptions about residential account growth, water demand, wastewater flows, and price elasticity. A change in how revenues are determined in new forecast models would normally be appropriate in a rate case, but not here. Now, GCG and the ALJ, we haven't made a big deal of this, and basically we still attempted to look at what GWA presented and kind of ignore that fact. But the fact remains that puts a lot of burden on the consultants, because when you start switching the methodology around, we didn't have the kind of time to really fully examine that. I just point that out because that is a fact in this case, but perhaps it brings up the need for future true-ups to have a little more established procedure exactly what will be considered. It should be a very easy, quick proceeding where you just determine those areas where there have been increased costs on the utility because of unforeseen factors. Now, looking at the rate case overall, I want to put things in perspective. The major difference in the parties is whether you should fund something called the rate stabilization fund. Stabilization normally implies stabilizing rates, but in this case, if you follow GWA's request, to put $7.5 million in the rate stabilization fund, that would alone be the largest part of the increase here. The rate stabilization fund, by the way, was created by GWA in 2020, has about a 3-year history. PUC is not involved, didn't approve it. All the funds so far that have been put into the rate stabilization fund are put there by GWA, the revenues, ARPA funds, and others. So it's really their creation, and it's never been sanctioned or approved by the PUC or never examined in any rate case before as to whether the PUC has any obligation to fill it or not. If the PUC approves a 27% increase for the RSF, then it's going to do exactly what it's designed to prevent, cause a rate spike, and again, a rate shock. They're asking here that a stabilization fund be used as a funding source to increase the ratepayers' expenses very disproportionately. And that should not be the intent or purpose of a rate stabilization fund. If we take that away, the 926 million in FY 2023. But GCG didn't offset that amount or deduct it from revenue, so that should be cash, a net amount. In other words, I'm pointing out that there are certainly other ways they could fill the RSF up. And those should certainly all be explored before we waste this on the rate base. So my point is there are other funds available. Also, the most important one, I think this is the most important one. Throughout, GWA has talked about all the needs that they have and the emergency. But if you look at FY 2024, they haven't specified anything, any cost that would be covered by the rate stabilization fund. What they've talked about extensively is that from 2025 through 2029, they're going to have a couple of $100 million in construction expenses and otherwise. But that'll be before you in the rate case. That's not even before you right now. Those costs are not relevant at all to 2024. And my point is they haven't demonstrated any specific costs in 2024 that would be used for this rate stabilization fund. It would just be money sitting there, I suppose, to use if they felt there was an emergency or unexpected event. But in the rates that have been granted to them, for example, debt service coverage, DCG agreed with everything they requested. That's been provided. They have been provided a substantial additional amount for power expenses. So those have been taken care of to some extent. So on vague assertions of emergency or we need to be secure in our funding, they haven't really given specific reasons to fund that to the tune of $7.5 million. So nothing concrete, and they talked a little bit about the expenses from Typhoon Marwar, that could result in a loss of revenues. That's not before you either. They didn't plead that in their submission to the case. That hasn't been fully examined or vetted yet. They're going to have to bring that up in their next rate case. And remember, they have a rate case next year. It should be filed by around April. So that's when all those issues are going to be addressed, but not in the terms of true-up procedure. Now, I did mention what I think this creates is a rate case within a rate case. GWA didn't like that denomination, but never before have you been required in a true-up to examine something like the rate stabilization fund. And how do you determine how much they need in there? I mean, it should be, they point out specific items that have to be granted in revenues, but that's just like a rate case. So that would cause separate proceeding. In every true-up, they're going to ask you, look at the rate stabilization fund, it doesn't have enough money. And then in every case, not only are you going to be doing the true-up, you're also going to be doing a detailed inquiry to the rate stabilization fund. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. Another point is that in terms of protecting against emergencies, in phase 2, there was a lot of discussion between our consultants and GWA about other means for obtaining loans, other than just giving revenues for an RSF. Those include short-term financing, lines of credit, and commercial paper. GWA provided a study on that issue. And I know GPA has done that. GPA has got commercial paper. They've gone out and taken loans in that manner. Has GWA even looked into that sufficiently? Why aren't we considering that more than burdening the ratepayers with this kind of increase? And GCG also wants to ask, why GWA's financial planning has left it in a position where it does not have financial flexibility to deal with unexpected events. I want to look at a little bit. I've researched in detail the RSF fund. I can tell you this, it's created in 2020. It was funded initially by about 11.4 million of reserve bond funds. All money is within GWA's control. Then later on, they put additional ARPA funds into it. So there is some question right now, by the way, as to how much funds are left in the RSF. I know GWA has claimed from the beginning that by the end of this fiscal year, the 18.5 million will all be exhausted from the RSF. The most recent figure I got showed that there was 16.25 million as of the end of August. So that would mean there should be 2 million left in the RSF right now. I don't know, I'm sure they'll say we're going to use it, but they have to use it. What are the other options? But I'm just going on what they presented in their most recent filing. Now on the history, as I said, it's always been funded by GWA revenues. And in fact, if you look at the resolutions that set this up, it says the RSF was established from GWA bond reserve fund balances of 11.4 million. And then, quote, any additional amounts, if needed, will come from operating revenues. That's revenues of GWA. That's where the money's supposed to come from. And if you look at other provisions, the transfers come out of the annual budget of GWA. They're supposed to be done on a monthly basis. So all the language in the RSF seems to indicate that they're the ones that fund the RSF. Now they come back with the argument and say, oh, it's operating revenues. And operating revenues can mean that we ask the PUC for a rate increase, and then that becomes our operating revenues. I don't think that was what was intended when this was set up. And I do add that there's absolutely no legal requirement on the PUC's part to fund this. All the funds so far have come from GWA reserve fund balances. And when it was set up, actually, the RSF said it was designed to deal with the effect of the COVID pandemic on GWA revenues and debt service. That was the stated purpose for the creation of the fund. In this case, as I said, GCG has proposed rates that would provide for 2024 a debt service coverage of 1.357, which is certainly adequate and sufficient. There's no indication at this point that any of the shortages in debt service or other matters are going to occur in 2024. So in sum, I think, and our consultant believes it's a very poor idea to fund a 7.5 million increase on the backs of the ratepayers, and there have to be better other alternatives, particularly when, if the commission approves it, it would be awarding a 16.1% increase. On power expenses, I'm not going to go into much detail, but the amounts that Georgetown cut for 2023 and 2024 were based on the fact that GWA in its calculations did not indicate the rate decrease that the PUC passed in June of this year. So it was that the rates were at a higher rate than they should have been because of that decrease. So that's why for 2023, the GCG has deducted 1.926 million. But as I said, they haven't offset that against the rate request. They just kind of really let it go. So the power expenses, and they've done detailed calculations on this. We've provided, we went through discovery on this. For FY 2024 beginning in January, this coming January. Now there is an issue here because we don't know at this point whether the PUC will raise rates next January or not. GWA built in a 3 cent per kilowatt hour increase in its projections. I do have to say, and ECG and I both determined this, that the power situation is looking a little iffy right now, and the rates very well could go up. Right now, they're showing a 20 to 30% increase. Now, we don't know what the rates are going to be at next January, but for that, what GCG recommended was a 20% increase starting in February of 2024. So we've been responsive to the power expense issue and really provided a substantial part of what was requested. Now, finally, on the employee salary and benefits, I first want to tell you that we both recommend approval of 97.9% of what GWA has requested. They requested 29.7 million. We have agreed to 29.1. Pretty substantial, 600,000 left. They complain mightily that we won't increase the current employee rate from 365 up to 379. 14 employees, they haven't told us exactly why that number is appropriate or what they're needed for. And you have to look at the history here of their employment levels. But by the way, this employment issue, it's not a big issue, probably 600,000 or 700,000, maybe a little more total. That's it. And in FY 2019, they had 371 employees. FY 2020, 374. FY 2021, 373. FY 2022, 366. And for this year, 365. They want to go up 14 employees. Now, the 379. It seemed reasonable to us that, well, before the pandemic, they were at a certain level, which was 371. And that giving them 6 additional employees would be something that would be appropriate. So that's what the recommendation is. On employee levels, by the way, the next rate case, we need a detailed staffing study. Because there is some feeling from our consultants we haven't had a staffing study in many years. So the next rate case will be the time. It's actually required under the law. But I think under the circumstances, what we proposed for salary and benefits was 97.9% of what they wanted. The only thing, there were a few other things, but the number of employees, that's an issue that the commission needs to examine further. So that comes to the proposed order that I've drafted for your consideration. The first recommendation is that you adopt the conclusions and recommendations of GCG and the ALJ and the staff final RAM FY 2024 true-up and the adjustments and schedules set forth here, if you approve those. Second, that an across-the-board increase of 16.1% for GWA FY 2024 rates is approved for implementation on October 1. The system-wide rate increase will apply to basic, lifeline, and non-lifeline rates and charges. The approved increase is just and reasonable. I will note that GWA's council has recommended that we revise that provision to include a Schedule A, which would be provided by GWA, would be approved rate adjustment and be prepared by them. I'm still considering that, and we'll discuss that with CG and it's feasible, likely. There's a correction to ordering provision number 3. And it should not read that GWA is authorized to increase the legislative surcharge 3.8 million. It should provide that the legislative surcharge is increased at 3.8%, and that's a valid correction. So in sum, I think you should consider both GWA, but also the ratepayers here and what their interest is. They, of course, would not want an increase in rates. We have determined that increase in
Thank you, President. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since the ALJ started with the handout on brief, I'd like to say, if you don't mind.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to look at this, if I may interject, if they're introducing new evidence right here.
Just the history and rates that were recommended in the prior rate case.
Okay, well, I have no objection. No objection.
So the ALJ has started by talking about how 27% is the highest in history and constitutes rate shock. It's a double-digit rate increase, and I would point out that 16.1 is also a double-digit increase. But the real reason why it's this high with this true-up, and I will point out also that when we came before you a year ago and discussed the different scenarios, with the recommendation that the ALJ had given for the rate increases, we told you back then that more than likely, based on what we projected, we would come back and ask for more than the 5.5%. And I think we talked about it being close to 11%. So even then, it was double digits. But the real reason why we're here for this amount is because of deferral of requested rate relief, which we had, this table kind of shows line by line where we started with the initial filing. And you can see at the top line our rate requests from fiscal year 2020 through 24, and then at the right-hand column, the cumulative compound increases that would have resulted in, right? And so we were requesting something that would have put us over the 5-year period at 44.1%. PUC's decisions based on the ALJ and GCG's prior recommendations resulted pretty much in almost a full 2 years of the 5-year period, GWA receiving no rate relief. So the line that's shown on PUC decisions and orders subject to true-up, 5%, that first 5% counted for less than a full year because we received no compression. 0% for fiscal year 22, and then 5.5%. So that compounded amount was 22.7% cumulative over the 5-year period. What the PUC consultants, their position has been from the stipulation all the way through the comprehensive review and update would have garnered only 10.3%, because as we know, they recommended 0% and 0% for the last 2 years of the rate case a year ago. I would also point out that they recommended 0% and they're now recommending 16%, so something must have changed. With the true-up, the PUC's consultants' recommendations the actual rate in fiscal year '23 and their current recommendation, it would put us at 35.5% cumulative. But the reason why we're here asking for that much is because the deferrals, every time you defer a rate increase, it means that if we ask for it in the subsequent year for the same effect, it's going to be higher. So that's just arithmetic. So that's the reason why we're here. A couple of points I'd like to correct in what the ALJ previously said. With respect to the RSF, there were no ARPA funds ever deposited into the RSF because that's illegal. The ARPA funds were used as supplemental revenues, but were not placed in reserves. There were no bond funds in the RSF. Those were purely out of GWA revenues. And the ALJ was not on the initial rate case, so maybe that's why he may not have known this, but when previously in the first rate decision, the PUC agreed to change the way the debt service coverage ratio was calculated from 1.7 to hit the target of 1.75 by using reserves to count towards the debt service calculation. That's not the way the industry does it, and we asked, and the consultant agreed, that we should go to a standard way of calculating the debt service coverage ratio, and we set that at 1.4. So the extra reserves that were used to boost the calculation to get to 1.75 were then used, were put into just a reserve account, right? Separate reserve account. But when the pandemic hit, the RSF, which the ALJ claims that the PUC has never seen before, that's in the indenture. And so it's a mechanism by which the bonds are protected by putting revenues into a rate stabilization fund. So your times are good, you put money into a rate stabilization fund, you take it out of your revenues, and then when you need it, when times are bad, you can pull it out of the reserve and count it as revenues so that your debt service coverage ratio is protected. And that's exactly what GWA did with the 11.4 million that was taken out of those reserves, was put into the RSF for the express purpose of bumping up our revenues because we were headed into COVID and we knew our revenues would be impacted. And it allowed us to keep our debt service coverage ratio above the 1.25 times minimum as required by the indenture. So we were doing it to protect the bond ratings and protect our bondholders. And that's sound management, if you ask me. The 2 points that the ALJ raised that you should consider when considering this true up are the rates that are needed for the utilities expenses and whether they're appropriate, reasonable, and just. But you also have to balance that with the impact to the public. Well, I will submit that in the prior rate cases, we have asked for reasonable rate relief that factored in both of this. But when you get recommendations like 0% and 0% and burn up all your reserves, you're not really thinking about the ratepayer then, because yes, it's a temporary relief, but they're going to get smacked with an increase because you're burning through all your reserves. And the reserves are not the RSF is not intended to cover for us. We're not asking for what, at this point, we're not asking you with an idea in mind of what expenses. We can't justify it because we don't know what expenses we might need it for. But what we do know, based on the last several years, is that we have needed those reserves in order to make sure we hit coverage to protect the debt service coverage ratio. And that's what we've used it for. By not giving us the rate relief that we requested previously or giving us less than what we asked for, it has caused us to be in a situation where we burned up those reserves. And that has been in order to kick the can down the road on requested rate relief. And that only makes it the impact worse when it finally hits, and it's hitting. This is why we're here. None of that I had planned to say when I walked in here today, so I'm sorry for that, but now I'd like to get to my prepared remarks and thank the Commission for allowing me to address you. I'd like to establish some context from our perspective that we think that the PUC, it's important for the PUC to consider when you make your deliberations. The table that I've given you kind of covers what we previously requested, but a year ago, we were here and we looked at several scenarios. The ALJ recommended an effective 7.38% for fiscal year 23 and 6.5 for fiscal year 24. GCG recommended 0 and 0. We asked for 8.1 and 6.5, and you ultimately approved by a vote of 5-1, 5.5 and 5.5. In that hearing, in fact, a year ago in September of 2022, there was a lot of discussion among the commissioners about the projected performance under each of the scenarios that I just listed, especially in regard to the reserves, the RSF, and what was there, debt service coverage ratios, and when relief should be granted in light of the ARPA funds. And I replayed the recording, and as much as it pained me to go through it all again, I did, and I made some notes on some comments, not all of which I will share with you, but there's one that I would like to bring up. About 3 hours and 25 minutes into the hearing, Commissioner Brooks recalled all of the rate increases from fiscal year 2017 through 2021, and she pointed out that what the ALJ had proposed was significantly higher. The chairman reminded Commissioner Brooks that in the past it had been as high as 15%, and it's come down significantly. And Commissioner Brooks noted that the fiscal year 23 and 24 numbers are forecasts, and she says, I quote, "Things can change. Maybe water rates and power rates might be lower," unquote. That, as we know, did not happen, and costs only went up. The contextual importance of all of the comments that I reviewed, I'll list here. Several of the commissioners recognized and were very uncomfortable with the risk of GWA's debt service coverage ratio being at 1.3 times, even if only temporarily. Commissioner Perez made a comment that she was uncomfortable with that. We've always been at 1.4, 1.3. I'm not comfortable with that. Those were the words. Several of the commissioners recognized the importance of the RSF reserves and were concerned with the reduction or depletion of those reserves from their initial level of 11.4 million. Chairman said, I'm a little concerned, quote, "I'm a little concerned about the debt service coverage ratio. I'm concerned about how the rate stabilization fund and the ARP funds have been shrunken down also. And what proceeds after the consent decree with EPA, we don't know that yet, but I think that they are going to have a healthy amount of work to do in the near-term future," unquote. At least one of the commissioners also stated that acting proactively would forestall higher rates in the future. Most of the commissioners agreed that things could change, and those things that do change could be addressed at true-up, which is what we're here to do today. Only one of the commissioners agreed with Georgetown's recommendation at the time for a 0% rate increase. In our filings, we have reluctantly noted that we are in a precarious financial position. The ALJ described it as doom and gloom. We don't say this lightly, but we think it's important to recognize historic realities before us. Although every Guam autonomous agency that has credits on the market has the same 1.25 times debt service coverage requirement, GWA is currently maintaining the lowest debt service coverage ratio at 1.31, as compared to the airport, power authority, port authority, with debt service coverage ratios ranging from 1.51 times to 1.76 times. As we're now at the end of fiscal year 23, the financial result and position moving into FY24 is largely known. A year ago, we projected FY23 expenses, including $39 million in debt service. Our total expenses we projected at $113 million. But the annualized FY23 actual expenses were at nearly $123 million. That's a difference of $10 million in expenses already realized, of which about $6 million is power alone. With the fiscal year 23 rate increase of 5.5%, we projected that our total revenues would be at about $106.8 million. Annualized actual fiscal year 23 revenues are at about 109.3. That's 2.5 million better than projected, but still an operating deficit of over 13 million. which require depletion of ARPA funds and RSF reserves. So we have been riding on borrowed money. We asked Auntie Lulu to give us 12.4, and she did, but that's not available anymore going into fiscal year 24, and that's the reason why there's a request before you for 27%. The ALJ made a comment that what Georgetown now recommends would provide for the debt service coverage ratio. No doubt what they're providing now, but what they recommended before certainly did not, and that is why we had to burn up the RSF in order to protect the debt service coverage ratio. These facts underpin GWA's true-up request for fiscal year 24 of 27%. This will take rate revenues from 109 million to 137 million and allow us to overcome the shortfall that we have depended on the RSF and the ARPA funds to get us through. It will also allow us to adequately fund existing debt service payments of 39 million annually, and it will provide a nominal partial replacement of RSF reserves at 7.5 million, which is still less than the 11.4 million that we started with. The difference between the ALJ and the GCG's position and our position essentially boils down to the three policy decisions that the ALJ went over. I won't try not to go too far into detail here, but with respect to the rate stabilization fund, clearly GCG and the ALJ are not in support of funding that, and we're saying it is imprudent to move forward to keep us at 1.31%, 1.31 times or 1.3 times the debt service coverage ratio and not have anything to protect the bonds in the event that there are unexpected expenses. Yes, we didn't itemize what those might be because we don't know what they might be. We're not asking to double the expenses. It's not redundant rate making. We're simply asking to replenish what the ALJ's prior decisions and the PUC's prior decisions have caused us to deplete in order to protect the debt service coverage ratio. I would point out that in February 26 of 2018, in a letter to GIDA, Bond Counsel opined that in the indenture, the authority, quote, did covenant to raise rates sufficient to pay debt service on bonds and establish additional debt tests, all in order to secure the bonds that are purchased by investors. In addition, in all cases, the government has covenanted in one form or another to assist with the compliance of such covenants, unquote. The government is on the hook, both in statute and in the indenture, for doing all things necessary to protect the bonds. The ALJ has stated that this true-up is not the right place for the PUC to act on restoring the rate stabilization fund, and that GWA can and should wait for the next 5-year rate plan to ask to restore reserves. I disagree and would point out that the PUC's actions in this 5-year rate plan as a whole gave rise to the depletion of these reserves. And so why should the PUC now be prevented from acting to restore some of those reserves in the true-up? GWA believes that a PUC decision to replenish RSF reserves is a reasonable and necessary safeguard to secure GWA's bonds, and would also be an affirmation of the government's pledge and covenants under the bond indenture and under statute. Second policy issue is the level of expenditures related to salaries and benefits. I'm thankful that the ALJ is willing to give us 97.9% of what we asked for. I'll just point out some corrections. Asking us to set our levels to pre-pandemic levels without offering any real reason why that should be. The ALJ requires that we do a staffing study for the next 5-year rate plan. We agree with that. But there have been staffing studies that Georgetown has undertaken, and they've been inconclusive. All they've pointed out is that in certain categories, compared to mainland utilities based on AWWA benchmark data, we are outliers, having more employees in certain categories than most other mainland utilities. None of those are utilities that operate on Guam. For reference, and just for comparison, to the Navy utilities for water and wastewater, we have 3.3 times the facilities that they do. We have 5.1 times the production of water, 3.9 times the wastewater treatment capacity, and 4 times the staffing levels. So if you just look at those ratios, we're about on par with what the Navy uses to run their water and wastewater utilities. We hope that the commission funds our requested budget for salaries and benefits. If there are adjustments to be made, we request only that they only apply to the funding levels, and that the PUC allows GWA operational and administrative flexibility to work within policy guidelines set by the CCU as to the number of full-time employees. Forecasted power expenses, these have been the most volatile and most significant and unforeseen expenses over the past year. Georgetown has acknowledged that volatility, but they've been no more clairvoyant than we have in trying to predict where those would be, especially with them at their 0% recommendation, even after claiming careful monitoring of oil markets. Given our precarious financial position, we just want to take a more conservative approach, and that's what we've done here. With respect to the other mini rate case or rate case within a rate case and how all of that has been portrayed, I feel that those are just distractions. I think both GCG and the ALJ may have incorrectly characterized our RAM update as new enhanced methodology. That stuff was always in RAM. All we have done is, instead of relying on year-old data, we updated it based on the most recent information we have, and we put it into the RAM. It's already intended to take in the price elasticity. The features in the RAM that we are using for this true-up are the features in the RAM that Georgetown asked for when they asked us to reconstruct a new RAM. So if we construct a new RAM and you ask for all these features, and then you tell us that we're not allowed to use it when we present the true-up, that just doesn't make sense. We are not trying to do a rate case within a rate case or make any new enhancements or change the methodology. It's all the same, except the data has been updated. And as for the claim that there was not adequate time to review it, we submitted it when you asked us to submit it. And the ALJ and GCG set the schedule on when that was. So there should be more than enough time. I would just like to reiterate one final conclusion that we make at the closing of our last filing, which is that we are at an inflection point in our financial condition, and the challenges in our path ahead are clear. The PUC's decision tonight will propel us down that path in one of two ways, each characterized by asymmetrical risks. To understand those challenges and risks, I remind the Commission that we have been authorized by the CCU to enter into a partial consent decree with US EPA and the Department of Justice, which will impact our next 5-year rate plan. So we know what's coming. The GCG has said that if it's outside the current 5-year rate plan, it really shouldn't be considered. Well, to me, we're driving down a tunnel, we see the headlights coming at us, and GCG telling us that we can't consider that because it's outside of this 5-year rate plan. It's like me holding the steering wheel, closing my eyes, and just hoping that whoever's coming in my lane is going to swerve. That's not going to happen. We see it coming, we know what it's going to cost. We know we have an idea of what it's going to cost, and it's not going to be pretty. And so by continuing to defer needed rate relief, it's only going to make what we asked for in the next 5-year rate plan worse. So we think it's prudent to consider it now, and we factored it in to what we have requested in order to somewhat ameliorate the effects that we're going to face with the next 5-year rate plan, and we think that's prudent. Whatever the PUC's decision, and this goes to the ALJ's point about what we requested in terms of addition to the ordering provision. Whatever your final decision is, we would suggest that using the same numbers that we have in there now, adjusted as however the PUC may approve, we just run a final RAM run, schedule 8-1, so that there is a clear baseline when we go to the next 5-year rate plan as to what has been agreed to when the PUC makes its decision. All we ask is that we give us a date, we run the model, submit the Schedule A1 that would show what the actual results or what the projected results are based on what you actually approved, and that be placed into the record. We're not trying to do anything more than that, just to document what you decide. So thank you, commissioners, for allowing me to make these final important points.
Thanks, Miguel.
Well, go ahead, Chris. Mr. Chair, we have Jim Madden with us. Sure. He's been waiting patiently, so you might want to give him an opportunity.
All right,
And I will have a few responding.
Jim, are you with us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we can read you loud and clear. So if you'd like to make some statements, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I just have a few points that I would like to make. You've had extensive comments, and I'd just like to add a perspective on a couple of issues. First, there is a lot of emphasis given on the zero rate relief. There's very little mention, in fact, no mention at all, surprisingly, that in fact the first couple of years were done by stipulation. They were done with agreement between the consultant, the ALJ, and the utility. And that agreement set the rates for the first couple of years with agreement, and it seems like GWA is saying that it didn't like the agreement, that, you know, that they signed voluntarily. That's a little unusual. The agreement called for certain studies to be done. They were done. The agreement called for certain standards to be set on the loss of water, which is very, very expensive. And everybody knows that the loss is something that's significant, that's got to get under control. Those standards are not being met at the moment. And that's still causing a substantial increase in expenses. So I just bring that perspective to say that if somebody goes ahead and signs a stipulation voluntarily and then complains about the end result, that does not seem reasonable to us. Second, there's a perspective that somehow, and this is GWA and their consultants saying that what they wanted and what they requested over the 5-year period has come to pass. Well, through August of fiscal year 2023, looking at the data, the financial data that was being presented to GWA's board, it really didn't look like that there was a need for this substantial rate increase. The difference has been the power expenses, not something that GWA had in their projections. Both sides, GWA and the staff, did not know that Russia and Saudi Arabia were going to get in a position of restricting oil supply with a target of $90 a barrel and perhaps higher. It's not known exactly what the situation is going to be, but the way that GWA presents it, they say that they actually had all these numbers in their projections. They didn't, absolutely didn't. What happened over the 5 years and the difference in the projections has largely been the power expenses, and we've put that into our report and shown exactly what that is. And those expenses did deplete the reserves. The reserves that GWA indicated in the rate case, by the way, were higher than what was ultimately awarded by the governor. And that's just a fact, that's life. But the numbers that GWA gave staff in terms of what the ARPA funds were going to be were higher, and all the information in the rate proceeding indicated that we could count on those reserves. Third, with regard to labor, as we pointed out, I think we've been very conservative. There is a schedule in our testimony that shows that labor has been largely stable or reduced in expenses for a couple of the years. And then for 2024, there is a substantial increase of roughly $4 million, where different increases are now projected. We've actually accepted all of those. The reasons as to why those didn't occur for the last 3 or 4 years is nowhere in the record. And again, we haven't rejected any of that. We've adopted that conservatively, understanding the financial condition that GWA is in. So with those, I think those are the major differences. With regard to rate stabilization fund, it really comes down to a question of the perspective of what the commission wants. What GWA is saying is, let's put in a $7.5 million increase now and just put it in a reserve instead of putting in a $7.5 million increase sometime in the future when it might be needed. And in the current circumstance, when you've got these substantial rate increases, you've got a construction program that's maybe going to add to the rate increase. We haven't seen those numbers. But given the choice from a ratepayer perspective, whether you pay the $7.5 million now, or you pay the same $7.5 million when you need it, a year from now, 2 years from now, it seems to us that the ratepayers would make the choice to pay that expense when it's actually needed. And so that's our perspective on it. It's not being rejected in any way. There are different funding mechanisms. A lot of utilities use short-term debt, lines of credit. And if there's a need for something, GWA makes it sound like there's no financial flexibility. These are standard financial instruments that are available to mitigate these kind of situations. So with that, the major differences were the elimination of the rate stabilization fund. That's about, it takes the increase, our increase, from 16.1 to 23 or 24%. The differences then are 2 or 3 other items. One is the revenues that became available from the Badger settlement. The other one is a slight decrease in the labor expense. And the third one is a slight decrease in the power expense. GWA did, for whatever reason, appears not to have put in the reduction in the LEAC that the commission ordered for GPA last year, in June or July of last year. We made an estimate and put that into the power numbers, and then said when the LEAC comes up for consideration next February, we put in a 20% increase in those calculations. And that basically is the difference between the two positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Fred, do you want to speak to it?
Just briefly. Miguel talked quite a bit about the past history of the rate case from 2020 up to now, and how there was a deferral of rates that they didn't really get what they thought they needed, they were underfunded. But I'll tell you what, that argument is completely irrelevant to the true. And true up, what you're looking at is what revenues are needed for 2024. And there's a principle in rate making. It says that you don't do retroactive rate making. The purpose is not to go back and correct alleged deficiencies in the past. It is always to determine for the rate year that you're looking at, year 2024, what revenues are needed. So really, none of what you addressed in this case should be looking back at history and saying, well, they didn't get anything in 2022, so we're going to make that up now. That's not proper rate making. That would be retroactive rate making. So I think that argument really has to fail based on established rate principles. And what the consultant requested in the different years, really, it doesn't matter at this point. You're only looking at FY 2024. Now, excuse my errors on the RSF fund. I was correct that 11.4 million was transferred by GWA from what I thought were bond reserves, or reserve funds. The ARPA funds may not have been directly transferred, but revenue funds were transferred because GWA had the ARPA funds. But the whole point is all those monies were GWA's money. It was their sources of revenues. And they weren't relying on some kind of rate revenue by the commission to build up the RSF. And in history, the commissions never looked at the RSF before. It wasn't in existence before 2020. So I think what Mr. Madden has said is a very good point too, that, you know, issues like funds for the RSF, I mean, you could put them in when you need them. There's going to be a 5-year rate case starting in April. If there's some proven need, then that could be considered at that time. But you don't consider the 5-year rate case now. Mr. Bordallo talked about, you know, driving the car through the tunnel, and why can't we prepare for it? You prepare for it in a rate case, not a true-up. That's where you address those issues of what you do going forward for the next year, not in a true-up, which is only looking for FY 2024 revenues. And I thought it was really telling when Mr. Bordallo said, we don't know what expenses we need for the RSF. Well, you just want money sitting there in case you need it, but that's ratepayer money that you know could be used by the ratepayers. If you don't know what expenses you need it for, why should it be established now? It doesn't make any sense to say put in 7.5 million when we don't even know what that money is going to be used for. On the debt service coverage, again, I believe that 1.3 was kind of accepted in the last rate case. The revenues here that are being provided, and Mr. Bordallo said that, would provide over 1.3 debt service coverage. The mini rate case, I don't think it's a distraction. It really is a question of what should be considered in a true-up, and I think we need to have some better guidelines. Because as I said, it should be a very simple calculation. What you decided in the last rate case, then you compare that to any extraordinary expenses. That's what a true-up is designed for, by the way. It's extraordinary expenses this year that weren't taken account of. But it's not to address any and all problems or address problems that are for the next rate case. So I think in sum that the case for filling up the RSF now just hasn't been established. It would be too much of a burden on the rate. Thank you, Fred. Go ahead, you got it.
Sorry, just 2 points. On the issue of the other solutions that Mr. Madden offered and the ALJ offered about GWA having the ability to have short-term borrowing or use a tax-exempt commercial paper program, we don't currently have authorization, legislative authorization, so we can't. But even if that's what we were to rely on for unexpected expenses, it would take time to get it. Yes, we could pursue it, and we actually have tried to pursue it, and we have not gotten anywhere with our oversight chair, nor with the chairman of the Ways and Means. But we're still trying. But even if we were able to get it, just consider that what you would be saying, or what GWA would be in a position of saying is, we need to borrow to cover our operational expenses, as opposed to borrowing to cover, a new car or a new house. I mean, those are the things you want to borrow for. If you want to borrow because you can't afford your operational expenses, that doesn't portend proper financial planning. And so the other thing to point out, and I want to make sure that the commissioners clearly understand this, is that using the RSF, we are able to augment our revenues and count it in the debt service coverage calculation to protect our position. Can't do that with borrowed funds. That cannot count as revenues, as far as I know. In fact, it hurts us and doesn't help us. So that's not an argument not to replenish what has already been taken. We're not asking to give us money again for the same expenses that you already gave us money for. We're asking to replenish the reserves that were taken because we did not have adequate rate relief from prior year. The other thing I'll mention about, just one other thing I wanted to say is, I'm not complaining about the past for any other reason than the GCG said that GWA's poor financial planning is why we're here. That's not really true. Our financial planning called out what we needed, and it's almost come to be where we are now. So I kind of think we were spot on with our financial planning. And for them to try and say that we didn't do our job, I think is not correct or not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Miguel.
There's one, go ahead, Chris. On debt service coverage, everything that GWA requested in this case was wrong. If they thought they needed more debt service coverage, they could have requested it. But instead, they just want to observe in case there's a problem. What should happen in a true up and a rate case is they should request the amount payment.
Thanks, Chris. Go ahead, Joey.
I'm almost afraid to do this.
So don't be afraid, Joey.
Well, I'm almost afraid.
You're most friends here.
So, if it's asked us out, I mean, I sat where you folks are sitting once before. I sat there for 9 years of my life. And I was also cognizant of the impact that this would have on our ratepayers, right? So I'm kind of like looking at it and saying, how can I put this in perspective if I want to look at the impact to the ratepayer? So I hit upon the idea of what is minimum wage? So look at the first page. The minimum wage is just the fact that I validated that this is the current minimum wage on Guam, okay? Look at the front page. To the front page, and I only take one line, the 5K gallon. And so therefore, on the very top is the GWA request. On the next line is the Georgetown recommendation. And then I said, how many hours does a minimum wage earner have to work to pay that bill? And so to pay the current rates, a minimum wage earner has to work a day. It's 8.17 hours. So in one day, he pays his water bill. And that's taking out the Social Security and the FICA. In other words, the net per hour is 8.54. That's what he gets paid, okay? So he would work, and by the way, usually minimum wage hours, they don't get deducted income tax, because I remember Governor Caldwell famously saying, 40,000 taxpayers pay no income tax at all. I don't know if you remember that, Doris. Yeah, so if you increased it to the GCC recommendation of 16.3%, that minimum wage person would have to work another hour and a half. to pay that increase. If you increased it to the GWA proposal, 27%, it's a big number, 27%, he would have to work another 2 and maybe, I don't know, I don't have the math, I'm not fast with math, but another 2.5 hours, let's round it up. So I'm just saying, you know, in terms of, boy, this is going to be an undue burden. I'm just saying, minimum wage, the guy has to work 8 hours right now to pay his bill. And then if he's going to pay his bill at the Georgetown recommendation, he's going to work another 1.5 hours. So in other words, more than one day and an 1.5 hours for the next day. Or else 10 hours and 39 hours. That's a day and a little bit more. I just bring this up. Now, I'm going to tell you 2 things. There are 2 groups of ratepayers we cannot help. Now, I don't know how many of you realize this, but Pedro remembers this. When we passed out that little flyer that goes out with your power bill, it has every commissioner's name in the box. Pedro, do you remember? And everybody's cell number. And my cell number is there. So I always get called. And I had one ratepayer called and said, Mr. Duenas, you know, I need help. I'm a single parent. I have 7 kids, and I have no job. And I said, oh my God, I don't know how to help this person. There's no way in God's green earth I can help this person. I don't know what to say. And the other ratepayer is the one who has a leaking system. Okay? I had a lady who said to me, I got an $800 water bill, Joey. An $800 water bill. I said, you know, ma'am, you must have had a leak. You must have had a leak. Okay, we went around. Finally, she said, yeah, you know, the toilet is running. It never shut off. And I said, so what do you want to do? This is another person I cannot help because I don't have the $2,000 or $3,000 to repipe their house. I don't have that money to give them. But then their water bill won't go up that high. Their water bill will be the $69.73 that it's currently is. I'm just saying, you know, if you're going to say this is overburdensome, I don't know how that works. And I know there are people out there struggling, yeah, I know that. But you're saying to me that, boy, this person has to work another 1.5 hours in the whole month. That's not it. That's not every week. That's for the whole month. Or else work another 2 hours and a little over 2 hours for that day, for that next day, to pay their water bill at the 88.73 cents. And I'm just telling you, there are people who can't help. There's people that you cannot help. I wish you could. I wish you could. But I don't know what to do. And the only thing I can tell you that I'm going to do is, and most of you already know, come December of 2024, I'm not going to be on the CCU anymore. I'm going to join Pedro. I'm going to be off. January, I'm out, Pete. 2025, I'm out. I'm not running in November of 2024. 16 years is long enough to be here. One final comment. The rate for GWA's base rate has not been increased in 10 years. For GPA, not been increased in 10 years, okay? In March of 2015, April was already on the CCU. He was, yes, you are, but we were there, he was there when we were asking to get the power plant, the new power plant approved. And I made the statement, we won't raise the rate, the base rate. 8 years later, from 2015, we haven't raised the base rate. And I only knew that because GPA's base rate was set at 1.75. When you set it at 1.75, don't worry. You want to set GWA's rate at 1.75? We're setting it at 1.3. It's very tight. That's all. I beg your indulgence. I'm sorry that I'm stressing you like this, but I just wanted to point it out, that's all. Okay? Now, I know that the commercials would be really high. We always said that you export the cost to the tourists. Enough said. Thank you very much.
Fred, you have a comment again?
Yes, just basically, this is kind of a new argument I've never heard before coming up at the meetings. Of course, we haven't had a full chance to address it. I was going to point out that I don't think Mr. Duenas' analysis has anything to do with commercial hotel or government.
You just
Nothing to do with the minimum wage, and it wasn't affected in any way, but even with the residential. We're making assumptions that these people get all work an extra hour. I mean, what's their work day, what does the laws allow? And it also assumes that all the money they earn in that extra hour is available to pay water bills. We know many people get paycheck to paycheck. They may not be able to spare that out of their day's salary. Many people on minimum wage don't have spare or extra money. So this makes a lot of assumptions.
Joey, I don't want to have a long night talking about
I'm
minimum wage.
done, I'm done,
We got to move on to other things.
I'm done.
Good.
I just pointed something out, that's all. You can think about it. If you think, by the way, I'm not very smart, you guys, I'm
You are
not very
very
smart, so maybe.
Thank you, Jen. You want to start? Okay, go ahead.
I got a question to Joe. What you mentioned about water leaks or water consumption. And, this thing is a 5-year rate plan or 5-year study. So my question is, in the last 4 years, how many gallons per minute of GPA saved by fixing all the water rates, fixing all the water lines? Well, but there's numerous projects that's happened in the last 4 years. So what calculation can we make to say, with all this saved, with all this fixed repair that has happened, this is the amount of money that we can avoid spending? That's all.
Thank you. I want to talk about GPA just a little bit here with their self-insurance fund. A lot of the discussion tonight is about the rate stabilization fund, which is something I'm supportive of, and I think most of the commissioners long term want to have a goal for that too. We've used it all up the last year or two. I don't know if you have anything in the rate stabilization fund right now. Do you have $1 million or $2 million in there at this point in time? What do we have?
Only the 950,000 from the Badger settlement, and that's all there is.
Okay, so we have about $1 million. We started some time ago with GPA, the self-insurance fund, and we set an initial goal to do $5 million, and we got to the $5 million. And then we had a goal later on to get to $10 million. We arrived there, and I can't remember now, we've used it twice actually. Once recently for helping to defray some of the pain of the REACT through some recent years. But eventually we got to 20 million. And then once we got to 20 million, we drew it down to 10 million. And we eventually drew it down to 5 million. And then we're in the process of recovering it month by month, year by year right now. I don't want you to feel overly anxious about this, because I know, and again, Joey made a pretty good argument earlier, that your debt service coverage ratio is really cut pretty thin to where the bond covenant is, unlike GPA. And that's something we all need to be aware of. I think we are aware of. I think we repeated some of our comments from the last time we were meeting on this. So I think we do want to set a goal to get you up at a certain level of the rate stabilization fund. I don't know that that's going to happen here this evening, though. commissioners to discuss what their opinions are on it. That might be a difficult thing to do right now, but I don't want you to believe that we're gonna leave you hanging high and dry on this going down the road. I think we do need to get something there for you, especially, and we might also need to reconsider what the goals of the debt service coverage ratio are too. So that's another thing we might want to look at a little more closely in the next 5-year rate case, but not tonight. Don't ask too much tonight. So that being said, that's probably our biggest separation point tonight is that rate stabilization fund. The power expenses, I think we're probably helping out pretty good on that. I'm not a prophet or clairvoyant. We've all proven that we aren't on this, so we have no idea what's going to happen next year. But I think we put you in a position that you're going to be better off than we've been the last couple of years. I guess I'm a little confused. I might ask Mr. Madden this too, or Fred. The 20% increase on power that we're offering, are we basing that on where we were at before our Lashley acquisition or after?
Yeah, what we did, we looked at the recent Morgan Stanley morning calls. Back in June this year, I think the diesel Singapore 10 parts per million was somewhere in the 90s. And when we were looking at it recently, it was up to 120. So based on that, we saw about a 20% increase. Now, since then, it's gone up even a little bit more. So that was just kind of a rough effort to see where the fuel prices could be going. But again, we don't really know, until we're in next January and the commission has the facts and figures.
So what is our aim point on this according to the Morgan Stanley? Are we looking at 120? Is that sort of the ballpark that we're looking at?
That's what it was about when we came up with this idea.
Right. Okay. All right. And staffing, we're pretty damn close on staffing. 97.9000%. That's pretty close. We're only 8 employees off. That represents 2% on the overall figure that you're requesting. What compelling need do you think you would need for those 8 employees over this next fiscal year? Or why couldn't this wait until the next 5-year rate cycle?
The needs that we currently have that we want to fill are with the Northern District wastewater treatment plant being twice as big as it was before and more complex from a process standpoint than it was before. Additional operators are needed for that facility. That's one. Number two, you charged us with the water loss control program, and we implemented the DMA program, and that requires leak detection teams to cover the entire system 3 times a year. We currently have 2 leak detection teams with only 2 people in each team and 1 supervisor.
So you have just 4 people on the DMA teams right now, those are the leak detection?
Right, and we need 3 teams to get that coverage rate. And we don't have the 3rd team stood up, but we are intending to stand it up in 24, which is the end of the 3rd year implementation plan. So we ramped up accordingly so far, but we know we need more people, and effectively 2 people per team is not ideal. We want 3 people per team, so that's where the additional staff are coming from. I recognize that we're not far off, but these are regulatory priorities that you set for us, and so we're trying to comply with that.
Okay.
And
Okay. I'll let some of the other commissioners ask questions here along.
Yeah, no, just want to make some comments.
first of all, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, Miguel. Rates, designs and rate cases are never easy. And I feel like we're part of this problem that we're in now with this whole kicking the can down. I get that. Now, there's times when we did ask for more, and we, whatever reason, whether it wasn't right, the economy was right, whether it was a pandemic or whatever it was, we always try to hope for the best down the road. It does compound, this issue that we're in. So, for me, the chairman said, talked about earlier about the NRSF, I believe that is necessary because it does give you the flexibility to keep your good debt and have whatever it was down the road, because you don't have the luxury of going out and getting a line of credit or having any kind of institutional finance. Other utilities do, other agencies do have some kind of fund that they're able to tap into. So the fact that we did not raise those rates accordingly and use those funds for it should be some of our purview to replenish them. So whether it's time to today or I know, is it, I mean, your rate study is coming up in January. April. So where are you today? You're now in April, and you feel that there might be some jeopardy in not meeting those covenants, not meeting the ventures, not meeting the debt ratio. Here, by the time you get that RSF fund, between now and then, where do you see yourselves?
So I think we did an analysis, and I thought we submitted it with one of our responses, but essentially, if we are off short in revenues by a couple percent, and our expenses increase by a couple percent with what we currently have in the RSF, we'd be in technical default. So the margin is razor thin.
So, I'm listening to your testimony, Georgetown's, ALJ's, Joey's, in terms of the difference. And I too am looking at it going, okay, well, yeah, 16%. I mean, we're looking at between what you're asking for and what Georgetown's saying. We're at $7, per bill, right? So, is there a halfway mark? At 16, I mean, if we were at 20 instead of 27%, if we got you the $3 difference, would that start funding in?
So I think
21%?
if we,
Because we're not really far off anymore at 16.
right.
In terms of dollars.
Did submit
$10 million.
Or, no, but I'm talking per bill. Yeah, right.
The headline of the paper is not there.
yeah. So
It's 60, 27, or something like that.
Yeah, it's better, there's gonna be a headline no matter what.
So for every percent increase, we could fund the RSF at about $1 million. So if you wanted us, for example, I think we ran a scenario, if it was $5 million in the RSF, it would put us at 23.5%. So if it's, 3 million, then you would just take it down 2%, and that's at 21%.
You'll have 3 million in RSF.
Right.
You talked earlier also about, you have a new consent decree coming up. This is a new consent decree, or this is an existing consent decree that you just got to continue to maintain?
No, this is the one we've been negotiating since 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, so this will be new.
Go ahead, Joe.
How are you on the current consent rate? There's a timeline.
We asked for an extension that they didn't oppose, and the court granted an extension until the end of 2025 to finish the one remaining compliance item, which is the work on the tanks.
Yeah, well, that's the previous consent decree, right?
The court order, yes,
Not the upcoming.
not the upcoming one.
Another thing to look at, Commissioners, is with the upcoming one, which we don't know what the details of that will be, that's going to be driving rates for the next 5-year rate once they do sign that. So and we're somewhat bound into that at that point in time. There'll be timelines on certain projects with certain estimates, and that's what we're going to need funding to. So one of the things we're doing tonight is we're trying to set ourselves up at a base level that we can approach that without the ridiculous rate increase going forward. So that's why we're looking at right now.
But isn't that why we're here today? Isn't that why we're here today, though? No, this is not why the situation we're in today. It's because we kept taking it down the road. But now, and how the rate increases are going to get that way. We're going to have to do a rate increase.
We need to establish a level that makes sense. I personally I'm not comfortable with the idea of replenishing that rate stabilization fund fully right now. I think that's going to get us all up on the gallows sometime later this weekend, maybe. So that's maybe a bridge too far to cross. But at the same time, again, I would let you know, Miguel, that we understand it. I think we want to get there. Just like we worked with GPA, we will work with you going forward. And it's like for you right now, you got $1 billion in there. But we'll get there. Get there. I just don't feel like getting there tonight. I'm not, if the other commissioners are, I'll listen to that, but personally,
I think with commissioners, whenever we're having to discuss utilities and the needs, I'm probably one of the sticklers about precedents, and I've always brought that up. For Georgetown and our ALJ sees this could be a mini rate within true-up situation. My preference is always to always have apples to apples and not apples to oranges. But then you explained with your enhanced methodology that was always present in your RAM. And because I was concerned and saying, why are we changing a method in a true-up situation when we should stay with the model that I have been moving with and knew and understood? Okay, so I'm like, agree with the chair for the RSF to be addressed at this point. I think that does, I think that will happen, not necessarily at this point from my end. But I can recall when the history of dealing with GPA and getting GPA up to where we got it with the power plant, the new power plant, and where we're at today, where GPA's, look at the challenge they're meeting now, and we brought them up to a healthy state. I know you're dealing with an old system, and I appreciate your lead section team. And I know the needs of you for the employees, and one of the things I always pushed for was workforce development. Are we getting our local employees trained properly to be able to carry GWA beyond your time, my time? No. So I'm at where I would move on to 16.1 at this time as proposed. And I'd like to see in the 5-year rate case where we're going to start building up and get GWA healthy. Because we need water. We need water. And
We're only beginning. And these are what the ratepayers, because they want water too.
One quick comment on that, Rowena. On the 16.1 though, that is taking into consideration that we're changing that employees from only adding 6, not the 14. Correct?
Yeah, it's adding 6 instead of 14.
And the 14 was, I walked out and walked in, were you explaining why the 14 was for the pre-detention teams? Additional 8?
Are they in the 6 or in the additional 8? Okay.
So I'm not sure where some of these numbers came from. I think in the RFI process, we asked about turnover, or we were asked about turnover, and we provided the response. And the formula I think that was used was where we ended up at the end of this fiscal year, what the turnover was, what we were requesting, and then splitting the number in half. So the 6 to 14, I'm not sure. I know what we put in there, what we budgeted was for what we felt we needed, which included operators at the Northern Wastewater sewage treatment plant because of the increased size and more complex process, and also to cover additional employees for the leak detection program. But with the funding levels, as I mentioned in my remarks, if there's going to be adjustments to the funding levels, whatever the PUC decides, we're just asking that you don't give us the operational flexibility to work within those funding levels and the guidelines that the CCU has given us with respect to the number of full-time employees. The other thing I will add to that with respect to workforce development, we are on the cusp of setting up a new apprenticeship program with GCC that will use coursework that's already been developed. They didn't want to do that, but Chris, our AGM administration, has kind of worked with them to convince them that this is the easiest and best way to do it. The content is accepted in California for their operator certification exams, which are the same ones we use. So the content will work. So we're going to set that up, but that's going to require us to bring people on under the apprenticeship program, which increases the number of FTEs. So don't focus so much on the number of people, but focus on if you want to focus on the total amounts, that's fine. And the last thing I'll say about that is the reason where the ALJ mentioned year by year what our levels have been pre-pandemic, and we're down a little bit now. Well, the reason why we're down is because we are losing people. I lost a level 3 certified wastewater treatment operator to the federal government and their contractors. So we get them trained up, we pay for the training, we help them get certified, and then when they are certified, they leave because they can make more money. And so, so the numbers that we're asking for are for recruitment, but also retention.
I agree with that. Doris, do you have any comments?
I just wanted to look a little bit more at some of the numbers. I'm not sure. I'm looking for it because I see different numbers in different areas. I'm just going to, because you were saying that this year our debt service coverage was what? Okay, can we look at this exhibit 2? There's what I calculated, the difference between the rate that you guys marked 27 million and the rate that ALJ and 30 times recommended is about a $10 million difference. So I was trying to find out where could I adjust some of the numbers closer in line with that. So I'm looking at exhibit 2. Not in this book, but in this book.
I'm not sure which exhibit you're in.
Or it's this book. Yeah. So first of all, let me just say, I also am in the how will get funded, I'm not exactly sure, but I know it is something that we need to provide for the going forward. Yes, Terry said that maybe not mine, but certainly down future. So what was confusing me, and I wanted to look at 23 to 24. Where did you get that 18 million plus and negative 7.5 minus 23 and 24?
So
In the rate stabilization.
the 18 million is transfers that transfers into revenues from either the RSF or the ARPA funding. So that's the 18 million.
So why a negative 7.5?
In 24, what we intend to do is to take money out of revenue and put it into the reserve, the RSF, the rate stabilization fund.
That's what they're requesting tonight, the 7.5 million.
So you'll note that on the total operating revenue line for fiscal year 24, it's at 137 million, 0.5. So we take 7.5 out of that, put it into the RSF, and then our bottom line total sources is 130 million.
So so what you're doing, I misunderstood what you just said, building up the RSF.
Yes.
Okay, so following what the chairman said, maybe not this year, but down the line, okay? But what I was looking for is $10 million difference between what, in this schedule here, you're showing a 27% increase, gives you 137.
Yes.
The rate increase that ALJ and BCC are proposing, that would give 16.1%. That would be 127 million, more or less, down, or about $10 million difference. Well, now that I know that, that's what we want to do with the RSF. I got my $10 million because taking $7.5 million down. So we probably need to do something in there, and I don't know what it is. It's certainly not the whole $7.5 million. Okay. The other question that I have is your internally funded CIPs almost doubled by $4 million. What would, is that from the rate increase by you're doubling your internally funded CIPs?
So the internally funded CIP is we're using revenues to fund capital improvement projects. So we have more capital improvement projects in the coming year than we did in the past year that we need to spend money on.
Use your term, and take some of that down, and we kick that can down further down the road. Because you almost doubled it, you're going from barely $1.6 million to 4.823, and then another $4 million increase in 24. So my question is, can that can get down?
So the can has been kicked down the road because we haven't really spent on IFCIP even though we had planned on it since fiscal year 20. So
But you have been doing some internal funding.
most of what we've been doing has been bond or grant funded. And some of what we had allocated for this are projects that have been on hold. Renovation of Upper Tumon is one. The other is that we use the internally funded CIP to also make equipment purchases because those don't fit into bond funds. For example, combination trucks that we would need to replace old vehicles which are going to be needed for the consent decree. So that's the reason why we're trying to ramp that up. And each one of those trucks costs about $1 million.
So, 4.8 million in 2022. Is that all internally generated, or is that also done?
It's IFCIP, that's from revenue.
Okay, there is some revenue.
How large is the bond fund supplement to the CIPs? You get a much larger number.
As compared to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, so the last, we've used up almost everything except the last 2028. And the 2028 was at 127 million, and we've spent down probably 40 to 50% of that.
Internally, revenue funded is just a very small percentage of your CIPs.
And we also use some of that for water line replacement.
It was used, I guess I could say, I hear you saying it didn't use that for.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, okay. So if you were to use about the same amount, maybe then, let's say, wrap it up to 2 million. Or got 2 million, and I've got 6, one and then, got about $8 million to offset against the $10 million shortfall. And then meaning instead of 7.5, maybe 1.5. Start the RSF. So I'm short $2 million. Why would salaries and benefits jump? Because right now the $25 million is not the right number. 22 from the audit. So even if I, be that as they may take 25 million, why would it go up almost 15%? We were talking 6 people. How many people? 12 people?
Addition 6 people from previous years. Now, there are questions for them.
Okay, so, but going from 25 or 26 million to almost 30 million, that's a $4 million increase, or 3 million actually. Wow, that number is just way.
So as I mentioned, the funding level is for what we think we need moving forward in fiscal year 24. The numbers that have been calculated, with whether it's 14 or 6, is coming from a different a calculation that had to do with what our turnover rate was that we submitted in one of the RFIs. So, the funding levels are for the number of staff that we need. If you want to make an adjustment downward in the amounts, I would ask that we focus on that. But the other thing to keep in mind is we didn't include it, but it's going to come up. We did not include what is now being required for the employer contribution and the new self-insurance plan, which is another $500,000. So that's going to come out of whatever number you give us.
Yeah, and that's why I couldn't figure out why retiree expense went down as opposed to the same as it was. So that was another, I guess, the we don't expand that number. Widen them down.
So part of it is a function of how many retirees are still around. And
I'm sorry.
and part of it is the calculation related to the self-insurance program, that we didn't get those numbers until recently. That was done after we developed the true.
So that, these numbers are likely to go up.
Right.
That's the one that's straight up. But, trying to find like $10 million difference.
Can I just make a point about the IFCIP? So the internally funded.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So the money that is used for the IFCIP comes from the revenue that's generated to cover the debt service. IFCIP is not an O&M expense, so it doesn't affect our debt service coverage. So reducing the IFCIP won't reduce our expenditures, but if you don't fund it, it'll reduce our debt service coverage. So it's a function, the IFCIP level is a function of the revenues and the amount of money that we use to cover our debt service coverage.
Or does it stop already?
Yes. Right.
So if we don't spend it, it's still in the top. Right?
If we don't spend it, then it would become part of our reserves.
Okay. All right. So, trying to find $10 million. Taking away $6 million from the rate stabilization fund, leaving something to $1.5 million, $6 million. Then $4 million from the internal budget CIPs gives me like $10 million. Already, I even saw the 16% versus the 27%. My God, I was still in shock with 16%. So, but this ALJ recommended it also in the rate of study. I think once the governor hears it's not a benefit to the door, as it is, they got to review right now. So, thank you for the clarification on.
Rowena, go ahead.
Miguel, where did the other 950 go from the 1.97? The 1.9 settlement was the total number that we were able to extract from Badger in the settlement. But our agreement for the prosecution of the lawsuit was a contingency agreement. So that is all there is out of the 1.9 that we received. Our agreement was a certain percentage plus expenses, and with the expenses, we actually would have gotten less than that amount, but the attorneys with us negotiated so that it was an even split. Bottom line is there is not 1.9 to put into the RSF. We're putting in everything that we got.
Okay, great, thank you.
As far as staffing, how far are you with force now? 600,000, 900,000?
600,000. Ours is a difference of about 900,000, and the RSF is 7.5. Those are the numbers. We're really frankly not that far apart. If you look at this philosophically, and we know that we want to support GWA over the long term on the rate stabilization fund, just as we've done with GPA and their self-insurance fund, we'll get through that over the succeeding years. And then it just becomes a matter of 8 employees and less than $1 million on power costs. And that's, I mean, power, we just never know. But I think our side has been very generous in looking at a fairly high number on that right now. Now you quote me on this a year or two from now, Miguel, and of course I'll be way, way wrong. I mean, with power, the sky's the limit on that sometimes. But I think it's a habit that others in the government have too, to underestimate what the power costs will be going forward. That's been kind of a characteristic many, many times in the past. And we've got caught in that. We're trying to stay ahead of that one, I think. But we're just less than $1 million apart on that right now. Yeah, go ahead, Lydia.
One more question. What's the cohort size for your apprenticeship program? What are you looking at?
20.
20? And the program has already been approved by the board or by you? And what is the goal for the launch upon approval? What are you?
January? When would that be, summer? Summer or? Summer, we're shooting for January, but we don't know if we're gonna make that deadline, so it might be summer.
Okay, so when that happens, then you're probably going to be looking at FTEs for that, for those slots for the interns.
I don't think
For
all,
the apprentices?
I don't think all 20. We're hoping not all 20.
Okay. And that funding will help you as well. Okay, thank you.
The greatest unknown here, looking forward in the next fiscal year, is probably going to be the power expenses. And if it were to come to a difficult situation and we need a mid-year correction, we've done this before with DPA several times, and we would do it for you guys too. We're not going to let you hang out to dry for the next fiscal year. Comment, Miguel?
As long as the timing works with our coverage.
Yeah. Well,
You just give us a couple
always-
more percent and
and everything will be cool, huh?
I had even swallowed 16.
That 16.1 is going to be,
I can't even
it'll
swallow.
be a headline.
They'll want to hang us off?
Yes, they will.
They're the stakeholders and the help of the utility. And so we want to make sure that the utilities help us too.
The other options are not very attractive. Let's say we did nothing for something very, very short with the 16 that time. And then we fall into a situation later where the consent decree is signed, and we're not in a position to move forward very positively to attain many of those projects in the future. We could easily go in court with the federal EPA, and they could easily do receivership on us. And at that point in time, we have no control over the rates whatsoever. Everything is taken away from us. And the rates, I guarantee you, will be far higher than anything that we're going to pick up. That's the other option that we're looking at. Of course, that won't be in the press at all, probably, but we all here all know that. That's why we have the responsibility. We're trying to make good decisions. Other comments from anybody? Joe?
You're saying, it's the same point, any buildings?
Yep. Because your total revenues right now are about 100 million a year. So every 1% increase you propose is a $1 million increase by and large. Okay, that's correct. With staffing, it's an extra 0.6. Even halfway, between us and them, it's 0.3. We need to be thinking about the consent decree, but I don't think you need to think about it immediately tonight, because we don't have the need to. That'll be the next 5 years. Want to go to 50% tonight? Yeah, go ahead, Rowena.
Hey, Andre, you said that they should file in April for the 5-year rate plan?
Yeah, that's in the proposed order. Well, that would be early enough. I don't think they would want it. But the rate should be effective for 2025. So that gives enough time, for all the proceedings in a rate case.
They'll already have. We actually have a goal. We actually have a goal. The internal PUC goal would be 1.4, but we're always flirting around to 1.3. Well, that's all it takes. Oh, we're not going to, well, I don't think we're going to get there.
We have to fund the rate stabilization. That's part of it. So that becomes the fallback.
The next 5-year rate case is going to be very interesting.
Go ahead, Fred. About the employees, that was a staff recommendation, my recommendation on the under 371. But actually, the order doesn't contain that restriction. Mr. Bordalia was asking for more flexibility. I think the way the order is written, it just says you get a 16.1% increase, but it did not specifically mention a restriction.
Miguel has the flexibility to exchange, like say the power rates are cheaper. Well, he has the flexibility to higher power rates. So let's all trade for lower power rates. Or if the power rates go higher, he has the flexibility to have slightly fewer employees. Correct, Miguel? You're not obligated to line items. We don't want you to be. Thank you. Adrian, go ahead.
This one does get curveball, but in the EV, costs us $6 million a year. Are they going to raise their rate? And do you know how much they're going to raise their rate? Because that's
They just sent us an email stating that they're having their stakeholder meeting tomorrow. So we don't know what it's gonna be, but they're gonna announce it.
okay, that's another thing to consider.
Do you have any preliminary indications that they're like, do they raise it annually or just every few years?
They do it every year and they adjust.
They have the ability to adjust it depending on their costs.
What have the increases been, say, the last 3 to 5 years on an annual basis? 2% a year. 6 million, that would be 120,000. That would be a 0.1% increase. More or less.
Can I just?
So you gotta keep it short.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to share with you the talk I had with the captain at the time back then, when we had I think like 12%, 15% increase. And, you know, finally I got him around, he actually wrote to the TV and said, you know what? Mr. Duane, this is right, but we're the United States Navy. We don't borrow money to fix our treatment plant. We write a check, okay? And I said to him, I said, if you would let us operate it for you, and we would do it, we would borrow 30-year money, because that plant would be around for 30 years. So what they do is they try and recover when they wrote the check, they try and recover that in the next 2 years. So we don't know what their spending has been. We have no control over that. And so all they do is they try, all their different people that they got to charge, right, Pete? They just turn around and say, this is what it is, and have at it. Our choice is to try and cut down, which we have tried to do. And we're trying very hard to do that. Just to let you know, that captain and I had a go around, and he said to me, he said, you're right. You guys get to borrow money for 30 years and fix something and pay it over 30 years. We're the United States Navy. We don't borrow money. We write a check.
Thank you. Pedro, since you brought that up, do you want to pass a motion with that slightly larger increase?
Basically, what I'm trying to get at is, how do we reduce the cost of living? You know, gallons per minute, that's how they said it. So what we need to do is reduce our gallons per minute that we consume from them, and use our water system from our wells down to Agate Center. And we did it once, but we did it before. It was the savings of over $2 million. That's how you become more efficient.
Other comments from anyone? Rowena, what's your motion? Repeat it again. There's a motion on the floor to move the motion as written, with a 16.1% increase. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Pedro seconds it. All in favor say aye. Pedro, you're not. Doris, you got to hang with us. Doris is an aye, and Joe, you're an aye. Okay. Adding an amendment, I guess. How would we work Robert's rules of order? Okay. Help me out with this. You got a motion on the table for as written.
Yes.
Motion to amend, amendment.
Motion to make an amendment. Okay. Joe? To add, so this would be adding 0.6% to the original motion. So instead of 16.1, it would be 16.7. First of all, is there a second? 8 seconds to motion. All in favor say aye. And go around one by one again. Pedro? Dina? Pete? Bill? Doris? Okay, the motion passes. So Miguel, 16.7. Work with that for the next year. I don't think you're going to go over the cliff, but
something comes up, we'll talk about it mid-year. We're with you, Miguel.
And if I request a special meeting, I won't get we can't do a special meeting because we don't want to have to publish another notice in the paper.
Special meeting for,
For any emergency thing.
oh, yeah.
No problem, right?
This is a special meeting. Yeah, our regular meeting is.
I told you that, then we held a special meeting.
Yeah. We only do this for you, Miguel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you. Thank you, Joey. Thank you, everyone. BWA, thank you for all your good effort. All in favor?